Senator Joe Manchin is apparently against taxing the rich, which means that he plans on being a massive pain when it comes to passing Joe Biden's infrastructure bill. Now, as we had shared with you earlier, part of the way of passing that bill includes tax increases for the wealthy, and specifically a tax increase on corporations from 21% to 28%. Now, the corporate tax rate, of course, would not be as high as it was prior to the Trump administration when it was 35%. But nonetheless, Manchin has a problem with this tax hike for the wealthy, for these corporations. And he shares why in an interview with a local radio station in West Virginia. Let's listen.
As this bill exists today, do you support or oppose that bill?
As the bill exists today, it needs to be changed, Hoppy. The bottom line is that's what legislation is all about. This bill will not be in the same form you've seen it introduced or see people talking about it. And I'm not talking about raising taxes, other than I think corporates should have never been below 25. And that's the worldwide average, and that's basically what every corporation would have told you that's what they thought was fair.
So there you hear Manchin saying that the corporate tax rate shouldn't be lower than 25, but it shouldn't be as high as 28%. Now, keep in mind that the corporate tax rate is very different from the effective tax rate, which includes deductions. I'll tell you how some of the most profitable corporations get away with paying nothing in federal taxes as a result of the effective tax rate. But nonetheless, Senator Manchin continues with this talking point regarding taxes being too high for these corporations.
This bill proceeds as it exists now and raises the corporate from 21 to 28. You would not support that bill?
Well, the bill basically is not going to end up that way.
Well, but that's where it is now. I mean, it could. They could do it by reconciliation, Joe. They could.
They can't, not unless we vote to get on it. And if I don't vote to get on it, it's not going anywhere. So we're going to have some leverage here. And it's more than just me, Hoppy. There's 6 or 7 other Democrats who feel very strongly about this. We have to be competitive.
So Ryan, on one hand, Joe Manchin is obviously on the wrong side of this issue, raising the corporate tax rate to what it was before the Trump administration. I don't think is even that controversial. But in this case, Biden isn't even calling for that. He's calling for a corporate tax hike from 21% to 28%. So I disagree with Manchin on that, obviously. But he is right about the reconciliation process. That would be, an effort to pass this legislation through a simple majority, as opposed to doing it, with 60 senators in favor. What is Manchin really doing here? Because a corporate tax hike is not unpopular with American voters. It's unpopular with corporate interests. But what is he doing exactly?
Well, he's playing the same game that he plays on all of these bills, and it's one that can actually work out for progressives if they play it right. What he wants to do is he wants to show up in public and show that he took his pound of flesh out of this piece of legislation before he allowed something to go through that Bernie Sanders can say is a victory. And the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package is a great example. Like at the very end, he trimmed a couple of weeks off of unemployment insurance, and everybody was focused on the great power of Manchin because he had held the bill up for several hours and he did make it worse. But he didn't make it worse on any substantial level. It didn't go from 1.9 trillion down to 900 billion or down to 1.5 trillion. No, he didn't take any real meat out of it. He just kind of sliced it a little bit. And so Democrats have to understand that going in. And so they should be padding all of their legislation with that they're okay with him taking out. So maybe they put in 28, wondering, okay, well, Manchin will knock it down to 25.
Well, the way that this proposal was put out by the Biden administration makes it clear to me, at least, that he went from posturing as a president who's going to kind of move away from the deficit hawk branding that he had created for himself, and focus more on doing what's necessary to help ordinary Americans who are, experiencing the ramifications of this new Gilded Age. But the way that he proposed this makes it clear that No, he does actually care about the deficit, which is why baked into his proposal is this way of paying for it. He wants to pay for it by increasing taxes for individuals making more than $400,000 a year, and also by increasing the corporate tax rate. Now, what I'm worried about, though, is that if Biden is too concerned about the deficit, and on top of that, plays ball with the Joe Manchins of the world who are so concerned about the corporate tax rate, well then, there might be more openness to some of the regressive taxation that's being proposed by both corporate Democrats and of course by Republicans. They want to increase, gas prices, for instance, with a gas tax that would affect every single one of us. But with the corporate tax hike and the tax hike for the wealthy, obviously the burden would be shifted primarily to people who have been able to rape and pillage this country. So I'm actually really concerned that there will be an openness toward that regressive taxation. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that is definitely something to watch out for, and you have to watch that it doesn't trim their sails. That they start to say, well, we would love to expand this child credit, and we're glad that we were able to cut child poverty in half for a year, but we just can't do it anymore. The deficit is too big. You definitely have to watch that. The thing to do, I think, would be to push it toward, okay, you want to reduce the deficit. Why is the highest tax rate on individuals so low? Why don't we create more tax brackets? How about for $1 million? How about for 2 million, 3 million, and progressively raise income taxes for all these rich people? You want to you want to lower it down to 25% on the corporate level. Well, let's hit those corporate executives when they're cashing their dividend checks, because Amazon, for instance, just came out today and said they're fine with raising the corporate tax rate. Of course they're fine with raising the corporate tax rate. They don't pay corporate taxes. The corporate tax rate could be 100%, but if you list your taxable income as 0, it could be 1,000%. You don't care, and in fact, you appreciate a tax hike because other companies that do actually pay tax then have to pay Uncle Sam, and it ends up hurting you. Whereas Amazon makes 0 profit, yet somehow the CEO of the company is the richest man on the planet. It's bizarre how that could have possibly happened, but it did happen, and so. If you tax the individuals rather than the corporations at a higher level, then you actually start to do something about inequality, which goes to what you were talking about earlier, this housing boom. There's just so much money sloshing around that the money can't find profitable investments. So it's like, you know what, screw it. Well, let's just buy up all these middle-class people's homes and push them out of there and hold on to these homes. So it starts distorting the entire society. So I think your concern is dead on.
And just to add to what you're saying, 55 publicly traded corporations paid 0 in corporate taxes last year, precisely for the reason that you mentioned. I mean, you have the corporate tax loopholes. They report their taxable income at 0 by claiming all sorts of deductions. And of course, there's that huge conflict when you see the amount of money that these executives make, particularly people like Jeff Bezos. But David Sirota and Alex Perez over at the Daily Poster also revealed some of the motivating factors for Joe Manchin, because truth of the matter is he does have some pretty close ties to the very people who want to avoid raising the corporate tax rate. So for instance, they report that derailing the tax rate would be a lucrative gift to private equity giants whose executives bankrolled the lawmakers' 2018 campaign and funded a super PAC that boosted his closely contested re-election bid. So there's Ares Management, that firm's executives were together among Manchin's top donors during the 2018 re-election bid. In all, they funneled more than $21,000 to his re-election campaign that year. Some of you might look at that number and think, well, is that really that much when it comes to campaign contributions? You got to keep in mind that it doesn't take much in funding to sway these lawmakers in one way or the other. And keep in mind that that was part of more than 200 $612,000 that the private equity and investment industry delivered to Manchin during an election cycle in which he was given a small business investment award by a major private equity group that has been lobbying on tax issues. And the list goes on and on. This is at play behind the scenes, and in the meantime, you have Manchin going against the best interests of his own constituents, who certainly are not against tax increases for the wealthy, who certainly are not against tax increases for corporations. But Manchin is willing to go against their wishes because at the end of the day, he's not going to bite the hand that feeds. And that's what we're seeing with this as well. Also, I don't know, this is a little bit of speculation and it's not that important, but I feel like he gets a kick out of being the one who gets to pump the brakes on progressive legislation or any legislation coming from the Biden administration.
Yeah, he has to be that person that in his mind, like that's the brand that he has set up, whether it's for a Senate reelection, whether it's for a run for governor down the road. His opposition to Neera Tanden, was at once, a favor to his good friend Susan Collins, but also kind of a cheap way for him to get his little pound of flesh while he was voting for that $1.9 trillion COVID relief package that we just talked about. He feels like he has to show some way that he's pushing back. And what that article did well is it talks about how tax policy shapes and structures our economy and our political economy in a way that is never really talked about in these conversations. When they reduced corporate tax rates as significantly as they did, what happened is that a bunch of partnerships, a bunch of private equity groups, these set up by a handful of very rich people to collect other rich people's money to then engage in these tax arbitrage schemes or pension siphoning schemes where they leverage debt, they buy Sears, then they put Sears through bankruptcy and steal all the pensions and then sell off all of the assets and then walk away with a huge payday at a very low tax rate. When you lowered the corporate tax rate, what it enabled those companies to do, those private equity firms to do, is to kind of transform themselves and reorganize themselves as corporations, because now they could get this same tax rate but also have all of the benefits of being a corporation. So now these former private equity partnerships want to keep that rate where it is, and it's one more of the ways that our tax policy distorts the economy and funnels money up to the 0.1%.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's just incredible how much revenue the federal government has lost as a result of these types of schemes that were made possible by Trump's tax cuts. The one other thing I wanted to mention is, while we're pretty focused on Senator Manchin because he loves to speak out against the very things that Democrats are supposed to be in favor of, there are other Democrats, as he alluded to in those clips, who are against increasing the corporate taxes. When asked about his views regarding Biden's infrastructure plan, for instance, Senator Mark Warner told reporters on Capitol Hill that he had expressed some concerns to the White House, but declined to comment further. So maybe he doesn't see it as politically advantageous to be as transparent about how he's gonna look out for the rich and for corporations. But Manchin isn't the only one. And for people who are befuddled at the Democratic Party losing working class votes, understand that this is the kind of stuff that goes on that people are paying attention to, and it does have a negative impact on the Democratic Party if they want to present themselves as the party that actually looks out for the little guy. Far too often we see some of these corporate Democrats fighting against the best interests of working Americans.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.